And joining us now from Durham, New Hampshire is Nancy Kinner. She is director of the Joint University of New Hampshire and NOAA Coastal Response Research Center. And Nancy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, did you in particular play a role in this particular report?
No, I did not.
We have Administrator of NOAA Jane Lubchenco saying she's very highly confident about the information in this report. The White House's Robert Gibbs says it's good news. How confident are you in the conclusions that are reached here, and how large are the uncertainties?
Well, I think that many of the conclusions that are reached have been actually talked about previously and are along themes that have been found at other oil spills, especially in warmer waters and near the Gulf. So it's not surprising that a large percentage of the oil evaporated that reached the surface. It's not surprising that biodegradation played such a role because these are known to be features in other places and in other spills. So some of it is not surprising at all. I think also the uncertainties are fairly well defined in the report and on the website. What we don't really know is whether or not the long-term impact of the spill will be felt among the species, especially in the deep water in the Gulf.
Right. Now we are hearing a lot of that from the oceanographers that we're talking to. I just wanted to ask you, other than what's been collected or skimmed, we're hearing dispersed, evaporated, burned, dissolved. We're hearing just actually gone. Can you explain for us how much is actually gone, or how much might still exist in the Gulf in some other form?
Well, I think that when you look at what happens to an oil in a situation like this, obviously what evaporates goes up into the air and behaves like any other oil pollutant or hydrocarbon pollutant would. So when you pump gas, for example, at a service station, you see those vapors come off when you're doing the pumping, and that material goes up in the air, very similar to how these lighter fractions did with the oil, and those get broken down by exposure to UV rays, etc., UV sunlight, and then the fractions that are left are heavier fractions, and they tend to make those sticky kind of tar balls that have been coming up, or pancakes that have been coming up on some of the beaches. The amount that's biodegraded is an estimate, but there have been a lot of data coming back from the ships that are out pretty constantly collecting samples, and some of those data indicate pretty clearly that biodegradation is occurring, and it's occurring fairly rapidly. We have to remember that that in the Gulf of Mexico, there are a lot of natural seeps of oil that have been occurring for huge periods of time. And so there is a whole set of bacteria that actually live in the Gulf waters that are used to degrading hydrocarbons, that are used to degrading oil.
And that's part of biodegrading. But when we hear evaporating and we hear dissolving and dispersing, does that necessarily render that fraction of the oil as environmentally benign?
Well, certainly the part that's dissolving into the water and the part that's dispersing, that's what the bacteria are working on. So bacteria like to work on these molecules or these substances when they are either dissolved in water or they're on very, very tiny droplets. And that's what the whole idea of dispersal did, was it breaks the oil into tiny droplets. Right. And so that's really what aids in the biodegradation.
And so the unaccounted for fraction of this, I think about 53 million gallons, remains unaccounted for. What happens to that? Well,
I think that some of it will basically be naturally mixing in and diluting out in the water. And as that happens, you'll see over the long term more and more biodegradation occurring. That may take a fairly long time. I don't think that we have all the answers yet. That's a very key point to bring out of this. I think there's got to be a lot of long-term monitoring to see what the ultimate fate of that oil is.
Certainly. What about oceanographers who study spills, oil's impact on different ecologies? That question, the methodology used in this report, talking about the numbers being extrapolations. One says based on theories, not direct measurements, and that percentage that is left over, that there's no way in the world that this could actually be measured.
Well, I think that it is true that a lot of this is based on modeling and on experience with past spills. There's no question of that. But some of it is actually models, and then they use some of the data that has come back from the field. So, for example, there is data from the field that you can see posted on the website that shows that some of that oil that is under the water's surface, fairly deep down, as a result of the action of the addition of the chemical dispersants and the natural dispersion at the wellhead. There have been several studies and sampling events that have occurred out there that show the size distribution of those oil droplets. We then can look at the literature. There's been quite a lot of work done in the past 5 or so years that's published in the scientific literature that shows if you have those droplet size distributions, what the fate of that oil potentially will be. Then you couple that with some of the data that's come back in from scientists who are working on the microbiology, and you can see potential degradation rates that they've calculated based on their samples in situ, and you can put that together to add to your models. So it is a combination of models and estimates combined with the field data that helps validate that.
Right.
And I think that's the best that we can do at this point.
And also the uncertainties must be greater than they otherwise would have been because of the depths of this spill. This is unprecedented.
Well, I think there are a couple things that make for the uncertainties. One is the depth of the spill, so that much of the oil did not reach the surface, especially because of the use of those chemical dispersants. So that in that particular case, when you can't see the oil, it's much harder to track its fate. But I do think we have some ability to make those judgments. Certainly, I'd put the caveat on there that it remains to be seen what happens, though, in the long term.
Right. Certainly a lot more testing, watching, studying needs to be done to really know the near, mid, and long-term effects on the environment, how much microbes are going to break this down into a harmless form, how much is going to affect the food chain as small organisms get eaten by larger organisms, how much of the oil and the effects are going to lie under the sand or under the ground to be seen another day. So it's certainly many more years of work to be done on this. Nancy Kinner, University of New Hampshire, thank you so much for lending your insight.
You're very welcome. Thank you.